Okay, so this next bit I think is kind of fun actually. This next bit is we want the randomization to take a fixed amount of time. You know, if it's a huge list, we want lots of swaps happening really quick. If it's a small list, we want to take our time. So here's what I'm going to do for that. We're going to create a helper. Let's call it swap scheduler. Okay, and we'll tell it how many swaps have to be done and how much time we're expecting it to take. Then we'll ask that helper, do we need to do a swap? So we'll tell it how much time has passed and do we need to do a swap? And in this way I should be able to, when we shake it, it will take the same amount of time every time when we shake it, and that way we'll be able to coordinate it with everything that we're doing. So let's give that a shot. Thank you. Alright, so let's implement this swap scheduler. I'm going to place this right by the bubble sort. So I'm not going to use Ionic to create a new provider. Instead I'll just go in here and add a new file because they're very related. So I'll call this swap scheduler, or scheduler, some people say. And in here, let me just grab from bubble sort our initial import, because we usually let Ionic generate this code for us, which is we're importing injectable. Then we go ampersand injectable, and that just identifies this class as, and then brace as something that can be injected. Shocking. But then we go export class swap scheduler. Okay, now for the constructor, we just want to leave that blank because it's being injected. Really, it gets injected and then we can initialize it. So we're going to add a member called schedule. And what do we need? Oop, little auto-completion that I didn't want happening. What do we need this to do? We need this to initialize a couple of member variables. So we need to know the number of swaps and we need to know how long that's supposed to take. So let's add parameters for that. And swaps, that's a number, and we'll say duration ms for milliseconds, and that's a number. And we're going to assign these to member variables. So we'll just say this, well, sorry, we'll say in swaps is a number, as is duration ms, and we'll just assign these now. We'll say this dot end swaps. I know, very boring. It's called plumbing. We're putting the plumbing in. This dot duration ms is equal to duration ms. Okay. So what we're going to do with this class is we want to be able to tell this class how much time has elapsed and ask the question, should I do a swap? Okay, so let's add a member called is swap required now. Okay, and that's going to take the current time. So I'll say current ms, and that's a number, and it's going to return a Boolean. Okay, now in order to figure out if a swap's required, we need to know at any point in time how many swaps were expected. So I'm going to write a little helper for that. I'm going to say private, because it's just used internally in this class, expected swaps at time, at this time. And once again we're going to pass in the current time in milliseconds, and we're going to return a number. Okay. Next we need to do a little bit of math. We need to write a function where if the current milliseconds is 0, then we expect 0 swaps. If the current milliseconds is the duration, then we expect this to return the total number of swaps, n swaps. And that's just a linear interpolation function. Pretty easy to write. Let's just do it. Return. And so we will start at, let's see, what do we need? We need the current ms. Current ms times the number of swaps divided by the duration. And I just realized that these are member variables, so I'll say this, and I'll say this over here. That looks right. So let me think this through. If you pass in the duration, if current milliseconds is equal to the duration, we get the number of swaps back. Right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. So that makes this function, is swap required now, very easy to write. What we need to do is we need to keep track of how many swaps have happened so far. So I'm going to add another member for that. So that's going to be n swaps so far. And so we're going to say when we call schedule, we're going to initialize this to 0. So initially we've done no swaps. Then this function is called and it returns a Boolean indicating if the swap is required. And as a convenience, it'll also up this counter. So let's see. Here's what we need to do. We need to figure out at this point in time if we need to do more swaps. So let's do this. Let's say let expected swaps equals this dot expected, and I'm not getting, I must have a little syntax error somewhere. That's okay. I'll figure that out in a minute. Okay. Oops. And I'm going to copy this into here. Right. So the first thing we're doing is we're figuring out at this point in time, current milliseconds, how many swaps do we expect to have happened. Then it's really simple. We just do this. We say return expected swaps is less than actually we want it's a little easier for me to think about if I say swap so far is less than the expected number of swaps. There we go. Yes, if the number of swaps we've done so far is less than the expected number, then we return true, indicating that a swap is required now. Okay, that looks right. Let's just check over here. Looks like it's all building. I know from experience that some of the times these red underlines, if I restart Visual Studio Code, they'll go away. But for now, that looks okay. So let's think about how to use this new class we wrote. Thank you. Okay, so let's add this. Let's use this class in our home.ts file. But before we do that, I noticed something I missed, which is I never increment the number of swaps so far. So what we want this is swap required now to do is to check if I need to do a swap, and if it's true, I also want to up. I want to add to the swaps so far. So what we're going to do is let's just do this. Let's go let is swap required, and I'm going to say, let's return that right away, is swap required. And between those two, we're going to say if is swap required. If that's true, then we want to go to this dot in swaps so far plus plus. Okay, so there's one thing. Now let's go over to our home page, and when we shake it, okay, first we need to inject our swap stuff. So let's see, private swap scheduler is a swap scheduler, and I think that auto imported. Yeah, it looks like it did. So now I can use this class down here, and after we know the number of swaps left, we can initialize our swap scheduler. So we'll go this dot swap scheduler and schedule. Now schedule wants two parameters. One was the number of swaps, so swaps left, and the second parameter is how long, the time duration in milliseconds. So I'm going to say 3.75 seconds, because I have an audio clip exactly that length, and we want to sync them up. Next thing, let's see, we got our swap scheduler. In here we're going to want to use it, so I'll just copy this, copy, and we're going to ask a question, and the question is swap required now? Yes. So the tricky bit, well, not tricky, we need to tell it what time it is, how much time has elapsed. So to do that, I'm going to go outside the body of the loop, and I'm going to say let, and maybe just to keep the timer stuff together, I'll put it here. Just let me tidy this up, put it above the timer. There we go. Let start ms equals date.now brace brace. Okay, so that gets us our starting milliseconds, and in here I can say elapsed. That's pretty easy logic. Let elapsed ms equals, of course that's date.now minus the start ms. Sweet. Okay, so I'll take this elapsed ms and I'll just plop it in here. And now we can do our if, or actually in this case we want it to be a while statement. So picture that we have thousands or tens of thousands of names. We may want to just do a whole bunch of swaps, and then and then pause, and then do a whole bunch more and then pause. So I think you can kind of picture that. So I'll just go while swap is required. That's not too hard to fathom. While swap is required, we'll just do the same logic we were doing before. And I'll indent this. Nice. Okay, and another problem I see can happen is, yes, especially since we're looping like this, it's very possible that after the, when we're done, we did two things. We unsubscribed, and then we set our timer to null, our timer subscription to null, so that we'd know that we're unsubscribed. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, we didn't actually cancel any outstanding, we unsubscribed, but one tick may still happen. So the simplest solution to this problem is we're just going to put a protection in here. We're going to say else if, and we're going to say else if this is set. Right. Okay, so the only time we're going to unsubscribe is if this is actually set. Makes sense to me. Okay, so let's save all that. And if we're lucky, I didn't make any huge mistakes. Pretty rare that we're that lucky. Oh, and I should have seen this one coming. Yes, so swap scheduler, we added it by hand, and the error, it says no provider for swap scheduler. Duh. Let's go to the files. Not only did I need to add this class called swap scheduler, but I also need to go to the modules, the app module.ts file, and then list it as one of the providers. So this is what makes it injectable elsewhere. So we'll say swap scheduler, hit enter to autocomplete, save that, and if we're lucky, this just might work. Let's give it a shot. So let's risk it. Let's see what happens if we click shake it. That actually, oh, looks, that worked. Now it's not as smooth as I'd like, and I just remembered we're not waking up every 100 milliseconds, we're waking up every second, every half second. So I'm going to change this to a 1. So now we're waking up every 100 milliseconds, and we're asking that question, hey, do I need a swap? So I think we'll find now, yeah, when I click this, no matter what, it'll take about 3.75 seconds to sort that list. Just wait for TypeScript and we'll do a little test, but I think this is working. Okay, let's try it again. So I'll click shake it, and after about 3.75 seconds it's sorted. So take a look one more time. When I click shake it, everything totally random, and then it's sorting them in the order that. Great. Now those numbers that we see, actually we're going to be hiding those. Those are going to be hidden variable. But I wanted to leave the numbers up there, the rank, so that we can see what's happening. As a matter of fact, I'll probably leave them on here a little while longer until we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But this looks good.